Today's story was written by Reddit user Humanity999. When the human ambassador to the Galactic Concordance was called forth, many knew as to the reason. When it was explained as to why the ambassador was called before the full GC Council, all the human ambassador displayed was confusion. Wait, you're telling me that humanity is on trial for war crimes and violating the Geneva Conventions due to the manner in which we defeated the Kilgrim Swarm? Asked Ambassador Lucille Vargas, dumbfounded at the audacity of the Galactic Concordance. Yes, you humans have violated your own Geneva Conventions and therefore must be punished, cried out the Saluthi ambassador, a generally amorphous species that could take whatever shape they chose, depending on their mood. Currently, the Saluthi was a rolling mass of gelatinous goo, indicating their anger. Blatant bombing of civilian targets, the execution of surrendering troops, inhospitable living conditions in prisoner camps, humiliating and public executions of captured troops and hostages, the nuking of garden worlds, the detonation of multiple antimatter bombs on several nursery worlds, the deployment of horrendous chemical and biological weapons. Need I say more? Sneered the El Rishi ambassador as he tossed his datapad down in disgust, pointed ears twitching in disgust. As the gallery yelled and jeered at Ambassador Lucille, all the ambassador did was stand there with a bored expression. Eventually they calmed down, allowing Ambassador Lucille to speak in defense of herself and her people. None of you signed it. A puzzled silence filled the room. None of you ratified it. A few members in the gallery shifted nervously, their species' more refined senses alerting them to the mounting anger from the human. No other species in the Concordance accepted and applied the provisions of the conventions when it was given to you. Ambassador Lucille was now gripping her clenched fist so tightly she was beginning to pierce the palms of her hands with her fingernails, the coppery tang of her blood becoming apparent to those with keen noses. So why do you assume that the rules apply to you? Yelled Ambassador Lucille, her rage directed at everyone, but everyone knew she specifically meant the Kilgram. What do you mean? The Republic of Humanity is a member of the Concordance, so every legally binding agreement is valid. The Geneva Conventions are no exception, answered the El Rishi in the prim and proper voice that his species was known for. I also distinctly remember when they were brought up that many in this council simply scoffed at the idea of such rules being drafted up hundreds of years ago and believed them to be so antiquated that they were to be considered invalid and obsolete. How convenient that you believe it applies to everyone here, now, of all times, especially after our recent defeat of the former premier military force in the galaxy. Sneered back Ambassador Lucille. So you believe that your own laws do not apply to you in this instant? That you are free to commit such atrocities? Free to commit them? Oh no, we'll pay for this in one way or another later. But if any of you had read the documentation like you were supposed to, before carelessly tossing them aside, you would have known that there was an out for any signatory of the conventions. And what would that be? That if the opposing race is not human, humanity is given free rein to slaughter them? To commit such atrocities that their population may never recover? Snarled the Kilgram ambassador. Oh no, nothing like that. There is just a very clear warning in them. The conventions apply to a signatory nation, even if the opposing nation is not a signatory, but only if the opposing nation accepts and applies the provisions of the conventions. You, Ambassador Clickra, and your entire species laughed at the idea of the conventions, believing that such things were common sense. and that common sense would be all that is needed to keep people in line. She growled as her hands gripped the table before her, hard, noticeable cracks appearing in the normally durable table. "You feel," started the Kilgram ambassador before being cut off by Ambassador Lucille. "But you are no better than us!" Shocked silence filled the chamber as a human ambassador yelled so suddenly and so loudly that the sensitive auditory systems of some of the ambassadors were blown out before protective systems could be activated. "What do you mean by that, young sapling?" whispered Ambassador Nilano, the representative of the oldest still living species left in the galaxy, the tree-like Willowans. They were affectionately called Ents by many humans, a nickname they smiled at with fondness. Sirius 3, Rylon 8, Canis 4, Alpha Centauri Prime, Eta Bootis 9, Pluto, Epsilon Indy 5, Adena, Wolf 359, Arcturus Station, Procyon Prime. "And what are those exactly?" asked Ambassador Clickgra nonchalantly, though some noticed his mandibles were twitching in his species, sign of nervousness. "Garden and nursery worlds that your species pillaged and burned, stations that were simply massive trading outposts, targets that this council claims to be off-limits based on common sense, yet the Kilgram blatantly attacked those worlds. Every planet has either been scorched clean or turned into prison planets, where prisoners of war and hostages were routinely tortured, beaten, violated, and sometimes even eaten by the more ravenous guards." "And what proof do you have of this? There is none, because it has no..." yelled Ambassador Clickgra before he was once again cut off, this time by a ping, as every ambassador present was sent a file that contained detailed interrogations of captured Kilgrami soldiers and guards, as well as video files from the security systems the Kilgram used. After recessing for an hour to review the evidence submitted by the ROH, every member of the council reconvened back into the council chambers, the ambassador Clickgra being dragged to his seat by security, 3 of which stood next to him and behind him to ensure he did not run away as he had attempted to during the recess. "As the council has seen, the Kilgram swarm violated your common sense rules first. Human worlds have been stolen, burned, or irradiated to the point of uninhabitability. Republic citizens have been stolen from their families. We have found some, but most we cannot find evidence of them. Of those we found alive, many were tortured without a care for age, had missing limbs due to either amputations or being bitten off by their captors, or they were found slaving away in mines with little to no protective gear." Casting her gaze around the room, her glare settled on Ambassador Clickgra. "I could have sworn that slavery of any kind, as well as the eating of sapient beings, was outlawed, if not officially, then through common sense," growled Ambassador Lucille, shouting the 2 words so loudly that the Kilgram ambassador flinched back. Returning her gaze to sweeping the room, seeing that many in the room were apologetic and in subservient positions, she continued, "We gave them every chance to prove us wrong, that they were the better people they said they were. We submitted reports on all that we had discovered, as per protocol, yet nothing was done. Every report, every complaint was swept under the rug. From your reactions, most of you never saw these reports, which only tells me that the Galactic Concordance Security Council is to blame for keeping this from you. If you had been informed as per protocol, the war would have been put on hold until we were proven right. The war ended and reparations would have been made." Taking a deep breath, along with a sip of her water, she continued, Instead, the facts were kept from the rest of the Galactic Concordance Council, meaning that escalation was the next logical step. We gave them one final warning, one final chance to make things right before we pole vaulted over the line. Their systems and the Council systems can prove that. After they laughed at the warning, they pressed on, sealing their fate. Sitting back, Ambassador Lucille sighed before continuing. So yes, we did raise and irreparably irradiate countless garden and nursery worlds. We did detonate antimatter bombs on garden and nursery worlds. We did gas whole planets with toxins and diseases so vile Nurgle himself would be proud of us. Yes, we cut down fleeing and surrendering troops. Yes, we reduced whole cities to rubble and ash, without regard for civilian life. Yes, we kept what few prisoners we had in horrendous conditions and executed many of them for the slightest offence. As she finished this part of her speech, Ambassador Lucille stood up and began clearing her table. As she did so, she continued to speak. We believed that, even though the member species of the Concordance had not signed them, that they would still see sense and accept and apply them to any potential conflict we would be involved in. Instead, our hands were tied. We could either bow down to a galactic power that was dead set in enslaving us for food, pleasure and manual labour, or we could fight back. They wanted to wipe us out, and what they didn't wipe out, they'd enslave. The Republic outlawed slavery centuries ago, and a peaceful end to the war was no longer possible, so extermination was the only choice we had left. If we were faced with the same situation again, we would gladly do it again if it meant our survival. She then reached up, ripped the ambassador pin from her lapel, and cast it on the floor of the council chambers. Everyone stared at either her or the pin in shock. She soon confirmed their suspicions. Since it appears that the Galactic Concordance cannot create or enforce any laws that benefit everyone, while being so incredibly corrupt that the Security Council would keep vital information away from the rest of the Council, information that would have led to this farce of a trial ending before it even began. I see no reason for the Republic of Humanity to continue being part of it. You may contact us through diplomatic channels, but we refuse to be a part of this concordance any longer. As she walked towards the door, the entire chamber erupted in a panic as every ambassador began receiving panicked calls from their respective government and military officials, getting reports that ROH businesses were suddenly uprooting, embassies were rapidly closing down, ROH citizens living within the territories of various Concordance members suddenly uprooting as well, their dwellings being sold for dirt cheap as billions of humans were suddenly leaving Concordance space. Military officials were in a panic as hundreds, if not thousands, of starships of various classes began leaving various ports, stations and formations, only saying that their government had recalled them when an answer was demanded of them. Tens of millions of ground troops were also doing the same, dropships and assault ships landing near or at every installation with ROH citizens and troops. As the Galactic Concordance Council developed into a panic as they attempted damage control, with reports already coming in of potential economic downturns, former Ambassador Lucille smiled ever so slightly as she stepped out of council chamber doors. Her bodyguards forming up around her as they rushed towards the nearest ROH transport, her office having already been picked clean by the Republic intelligence agents. Dipping her head down, former Ambassador Lucille whispered into a hidden mic on her lapel. Operation Downfall is a go. I repeat, Operation Downfall is a go. Almost immediately did she receive a response. Copy that, Agent Francesca. Return to base when able. Ad Victoriam. Copy, Command. Ad Victoriam, whispered Lucille. As she strode towards the awaiting shuttle, no longer was she Ambassador Lucille of the Republic of Humanity, former or otherwise. In her place was Senior Field Agent Lucille Francesca of the Republic Intelligence Corps, ready to bring about the downfall of yet another galactic superpower. As the shuttle lifted off towards the cruiser she would be taking home, the ROHS Righteous Vengeance, she grinned down at the planet below her, the seat of power for the entire Galactic Concordance. You'll regret thinking that our rules didn't apply to you.